Welcome to OLC40, Term 1A, Class 10. This is Lesson 5, and we're doing the readings and practice for it. It is September 17th, 2025, Week 3, and this is Jillian Percy. All right, ways to contact us. The studio number is 1-800-465-7144. Hoping you're not seeing all these little doodads. They aren't supposed to be there. There you go. The office number is 1-800-667-3703, extension 2211. And the email, jillian.percy@nnec.on.ca. Facebook, capital G, capital P, ERCY, space, capital W, AHSA. And there are 2 YouTube channels where the classes are stored. There's my teacher one, which is also G Percy WASA, and then there is the school one, WASA Distance Education YouTube channel. And you just go to the playlist for OLC40 for 25-26. Okay, when you hand in work, please send it to studentwork@nnec.on.ca. That way it gets logged into the system that you've submitted the work. If I happen to be sick that week, it still gets registered. Make sure your full name, course name, assignment name and number are physically on the document, not just in the email, because I don't see the email. It gets printed off and put on my desk, okay? If an assignment asks for both a rough and a good draft, please label which one is which and include them both in the same email. There are multiple ways to hand in assignments. You can give it to the DEC at your learning center and have them scan it in and email it to me. Hang on to your originals. You can fax it to me at 1-800-463-7852, but if you do that, make sure to tell me so I turn the fax machine on. You can scan it using a scanner app on your phone and then send it to me. I discourage people from mailing it, but it can be done. But if you do that, make sure you photocopy and only send me your photocopies. But it takes a while, and there's postal strikes and all those kind of things, so I don't encourage it. If you do a lot of your assignments on the computer on Google Docs, you can just share those documents with me. And if you handwrite them, a lot of people will just take a photograph of it and send that to me through Facebook or through email. When you do that, make sure the photograph is clear, not blurred, preferably written in pen so it's nice and dark. Don't just click the share button because it comes up as a very odd size on my computer. Instead, it will come up as email or email as an attachment. Hit send as an attachment. It's a much more downloadable form, I find. And then if you want to use the scanner, which is basically like taking a photograph, but it does a better job, right? The photographs can come out kind of sketchy sometimes, but the document scanner comes up nice and crisp and clear. Obviously, you can use another one. This is the one I use, Adobe Scan. You download it, then you open it up. You line up the dots with the corners or with the borders. You take all the pictures that you need for that assignment, hit continue. Then it will let you preview. You can reorder things or crop pages or retake it if it's blurry. Hit a save PDF, give it a name, and then save it to wherever you save your stuff, Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, and then send me an email and send it along, okay? That is, if you're going to send me a lot of stuff by photograph, this is a much better way to do it. It's just so much cleaner copy, basically. Okay, so we are on the last lesson of Unit 1. It's Lesson 5. We're not going to get finished today, but we're going to get a good start on it anyways. This is all about nonfiction types and how to use reading strategies with nonfiction. The success criteria for Lesson 5. By the end of this lesson, you will have achieved the lesson goals if you can understand the meaning and usage of different types of punctuation, identify distinguishing characteristics of different types of nonfiction, demonstrate understanding of news reports by locating information, making connections and inferences, activating background knowledge and monitoring comprehension, brainstorming, planning, and creating a rough draft of a news report following the inverted pyramid format. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the different forms of punctuation. If you're not familiar with them, these are useful to know what they generally indicate. It helps you when you're reading, it helps you use them correctly when you're writing. So these little curved bars are sometimes called brackets, but their official title is actually parentheses. They are used to enclose any extra information in a sentence, such as a date, a name, a book reference, or any kind of side notes. Anything that isn't strictly needed to understand the main point of the sentence, but is considered extra. So for example, Sioux Lookout, parentheses, aka the hub of the North, close parentheses, is a small town in northern Ontario. Then we've got these little square items, which are often referred to as square brackets. They are not very commonly used in writing. Usually it's only when an editor wants to show a little bit of extra information in a quotation that wasn't originally there. Sometimes it's information that the editor thinks people might need to know in order to understand the original quote. Sometimes an editor might write sic, S-I-C, in those, and it kind of means like I found it this way, which is usually what they do when something is spelled wrong or there's some sort of mistake in the original text. And they want you to know that they, as the editor, know I know this isn't right, but this is the actual quote of what got said or what was written, and so I am legitimately, redoing it the way it was supposed to be done, right? It's part of making sure that you're being honest about your sources. So for example, he was as mean. Mean is spelled M-E-E-N there. And so then in square brackets, it's got sick as a rattlesnake. And the word should have been spelled mean. The editor putting that in there means that he knows that, hey, I know this is wrong, but this is how the original person wrote it. That's all. So that isn't a common thing that you would be doing for your own writing. Okay? Quotation marks. Those are usually used to surround a direct quotation of exact speech from someone. In handwriting, the front set will look like a 66 and the back set will look like a 99. Quotations are also used to set off the titles of articles, brochures, or songs. So for example, "What a beautiful sunny day," Tammy remarked, and around what and at the end of day, we've put quotation marks to show that's what she actually said. Or here we've got the brochure is entitled "Explore Sunset County," and there's quotations in front of explore and quotations at the end of count or Sunset Country. Sorry, country, not county. All right, apostrophe. Apostrophes are one of the ones I find people are a little bit mixed up on sometimes. Apostrophes are generally used for two main reasons. To show possession, like if I said Jenny's backpack, the apostrophe S shows that the backpack belongs to Jenny. Or to show that letters are missing in a set of contractions, things like don't or can't. But we do not use them to show that a word is plural. Sometimes I have students will write "the dogs were hungry," and they've put DOG apostrophe S. But that's not right. There's no words missing there, and there's nothing being owned. They just mean there's a lot of dogs that are hungry, in which case I just need the S. I don't need an apostrophe there at all. I use the apostrophe S if the word is singular. If it's already got an S on the end, like if I was talking about, I can't think of an example right now off the top of my head. If I was talking about anything that already had an S on the end, I don't need to add a second S because there's no way wouldn't make any sense. I just add the apostrophe. But if it's a plural that isn't done with adding an S, some of those words that we borrow from other languages, for example, then you can use apostrophe S. So here's some examples. For singular, the dog's toy, DOG apostrophe S. Sam's backpack, SAM apostrophe S. The doctor's coat, DOCTOR apostrophe S. And then on the plural side, we've got all the stray cats howling was loud. And cats is CATS apostrophe. The students' lunches were ready. Students is STUDENTS apostrophe. And then the last one we've got the children's books are by the front door. Now children is already plural, but it's not a plural that we did making by adding an S, so it's fine to add the apostrophe S, right? That's kind of the criteria, basically. Okay, so looking at contractions. We also use apostrophes to show that some letters are missing when creating contractions. When we talk, we often talk quickly and we will push two words together to create one word. Usually when we do that, we sort of drop a sound or two, and when we write, we put an apostrophe in the place of that missing letter to show, hey, I know this originally had more letters, but this is what's missing. So I have becomes I apostrophe VE, I've. We use a lot of contractions in English. I don't know if that's true in other languages or not. Here we go over some of the most common contractions. Sometimes when we don't use contractions in our writing or speech, it can make our words sound a little bit stiff or a little bit formal. Okay. Okay, so these ones are present tense. I plus am equals I'm, like I'm going to the store. It plus is it's. It's windy today. He plus is he's my brother. She plus is she's swimming tonight. Who plus is who's hungry. I plus have I've been running. You plus have you've been sick. You plus are you're on the team. We plus are we're done our work. Now, it looks almost the same as were, W-E-R-E, but that apostrophe makes all the difference. It changes how you say it, and it changes what it means, okay? They plus are is they're coming home. And then we've got our future tense, things like I plus will, I'll be flying soon. He plus will, he'll be happy to see you. Now, that looks a lot like the word hell, but we don't say it that way because there's the apostrophe, and we try to hang on to the pronunciation of the original two words. So he'll, all right? She plus will, she'll be ready soon. And again, that looks a lot like shall, but the apostrophe makes all the difference. You plus will, you'll need a calculator. We plus will, we'll go to the park later. They plus will, they'll be ready at 5 o'clock. It plus will, it'll be dark soon. Okay, some common contractions can get mixed up. I plus would or I plus had both get shortened down the same way, okay? And they both become I'd. And that's true for every single contraction that uses would and had. We end up just shortening them to the D. Now, any contractions that's using the word would are conditional, and we're talking about the future. Like, I would like to go to the park tomorrow if I have time. I'd like to go to the park tomorrow if I have time. But any contractions that are using the word had are usually based in the past. I had driven there yesterday. I'd driven there yesterday. So you have to look at the context of the sentence to know whether the contraction is talking about the future or and the word would, or the past and the word had. Okay? So you have he would or he had become he'd. She would or she had become she'd. They would or they had become they'd. You would or you had become you'd. We would or we had become we'd. Or it would or it had become it'd. Now, it'd is an awkward sounding contraction. It doesn't come up super often because it does sound quite awkward. Okay. So then there's a lot of contractions that use not, okay? Things like do plus not equals don't, can plus not equals can't, will plus not equals won't, have plus not equals haven't, did plus not equals didn't, was plus not equals wasn't, were plus not equals weren't, had plus not equals hadn't, would plus not equals wouldn't, could plus not equals couldn't, should plus not equals shouldn't, has plus not equals hasn't, is plus not equals isn't, and are plus not equals aren't. These contractions are sometimes used at the beginning of a sentence, whenever you see it that way, the question is kind of implying that the person who's asking the question assumes that you're going to answer negatively, but they're not 100% certain. Like if they're saying, "Didn't you do the dishes yet?" It's because they're seeing dirty dishes around the kitchen and they're kind of like getting on your case a little bit. Like, or isn't he done his homework? Again, that's where they think you should have been done already and they're questioning why it's not done yet. Aren't you coming with us? Weren't you scared? Can't you find your keys? There's kind of like a little bit of an implied negativity in there, okay? And then we've got some, confusion. There are a few words so that when we contract them, it sounds like another word. So when I say he would have, and we say it quickly, we say he would have, it sounds like I'm saying the word of, O-F. But there's no contraction that uses OF because it's already short, and there'd be nothing to contract, okay? And of isn't a verb, so it doesn't really make sense in this spot. So when I'm saying he would have and people want to write it out long, which sometimes happens, I would never write he would of, I would write he would have. Same thing if I'm talking about she could have, not she could of. It should have is, again, should have, not should of. Of is almost never used as a part of a contraction. When it is, it's not going to sound like of. So if I said 8 o'clock, there, I'm dropping the F and just saying O, and it means like 8 of the clock, the hour, basically, right? But when it sounds like of, it's not the word of, which I know is confusing. So keep that in mind when you're looking at that one. All right, going back to other punctuation marks. An ellipsis, the dot dot dot, is used to show that a sentence or a quotation is unfinished. So if I said, the detective said, the murderer is, and they pause, I would do dot 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 to show, hey, he's just stopped speaking. I know this sentence isn't finished, right? It can also be used to show that a character is taking a pause when they're speaking. So if he was going to say, the murderer is the cop or something, they're giving that dramatic pause. That's what it means, okay? A dash can be used for several different purposes. Sometimes it can be used to separate a word from the rest of the sentence to show emphasis. You have won a new car. Or the dash can be used to introduce and close off a short list. He had everything he needed, dash, grit, brains, and ambition, close dash, in order to make it as a businessman. The dash can be used to show some non-essential information that you want to add to a sentence as well. Susan, dash, a woman I hated, dash, was the new PTA president. And then we've got a hyphen, which looks a lot like a dash, but it has a different purpose. A hyphen is when you're joining two words together to create a compound word. So for example, words like son-in-law, son hyphen in hyphen law, or 56, 50 hyphen 6. You will sometimes see it too if a writer runs out of space while they're writing a word and they need to continue the word on the next line. Like say I was wanting to finish the word continue and I'd run out of room. I might say C-O-N, con, and then I'd put a hyphen, and continue would go on the next line to show I'm not writing the word con, I'm writing a word that isn't finished yet. You would see this more when people were doing typing, because sometimes you'd type a word and think you had space, and then you get to the end and discover, oh, wait, I didn't quite have enough space. So I don't think you see it as often as you used to, but it still shows up. So here are some examples of some hyphenated words. Self-esteem, ex-husband, merry-go-round, self-check, well-known author, prepaid phone, check-in, clean cut. Okay, a colon. A colon is like two dots standing on top of each other, like a snowman with just two body parts. It can be used to introduce a list. It can also be used to separate a heading from a subheading on a book. Like the dash, it is also sometimes used to show emphasis on a particular word. So for example, if it said, soon it would be her favorite holiday, colon, Halloween. It does also get used to separate units of time. Like if I said 8:30, I put a colon between the hours and between the minutes. And you'll see it sometimes if they're doing races where they might show you minutes plus seconds. Um, Also for lists, he had been so many places, colon, Hawaii, Texas, Arizona, California, Utah, Nevada. It's just another way to show a list. There's more than one way. I don't know why we have more than one, but it does show up that way in English. And then we have a semicolon. A semicolon looks like a comma on the bottom, and then there's a period over top of it, kind of like a winky eye, right? It is sometimes used as sort of a super comma in a list that already had commas, but still needs to separate the items in some fashion. One example would be a list of dates or places. I will be in town on Monday, January 25th, semicolon. Oh, Tuesday, sorry, February 3rd, and Wednesday, March 15th. Now, there's no semicolon at the end because we've got a period there, okay? So this one, yeah, there should really be a period there because Tuesday's a short form, but it looks awkward, doesn't it? A semicolon is also used to separate two smaller sentences within a larger sentence that are connected in meaning, okay? Good students do every assignment, semicolon. This is crucial for success. It's when people don't want to use a conjunction, and also when the two sentences, they kind of lean on each other. They're still able to be independent. They could be completely different, but they're kind of linked in a concept essentially. Okay, types of nonfiction. There are so many types of nonfiction. I want to point out I'm doing sort of a bare bones look at some of the bigger categories. You could drill down and probably list like 40 different specialty categories, but these are some of the big ones, okay? Lesson 4, we were looking at fictional narratives. Here, these are nonfiction narratives. Nonfiction simply means anything that's true. A narrative is essentially anything that's told in a story format, which means oh, sorry guys, a little bit of a coughing fit there. Okay, a narrative is told in a story format, which usually means it's chronological order, with a beginning, rising action, a climax, and an ending. Non-narrative material will usually organize the information under main topics and subheadings, like a book on different types of birds. Just like in fiction, there are a lot of nonfiction genres. Experts differ on the number of nonfiction genres, but here we're going to talk about the main types. Yep, we've talked about that. Sorry. I now feel like I'm going to cough constantly. I hope that's not going to happen. Narratives are a part of life. Okay, in everyday life, we're always telling nonfiction narratives, right? We tell about funny adventures we had on vacation, or we share a funny work incident with a friend, or tell somebody a scary experience we had, or give somebody the sad news about an uncle's accident when we're trying to explain how he broke his leg. So I'm going to talk about some of these different nonfiction genres. Some of them are written in a narrative or story format, some of them are not. And I'm just mentioning this because it's one of the concepts that we talk about a little bit in this course is narrative versus non-narrative information. So history. Historical nonfiction involves writing about true accounts of different events and times in history. These accounts may attempt to be purely objective and present all sides and viewpoints of an issue, or it might be filtered through one person or one group's viewpoint of the events. Historical nonfiction is often presented in a narrative style that relates the events in the style of a story, but it is not always written that way. So some examples here, we've got Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, which talks about some of the fighting between the Indigenous people in the States, and Indigenous and the settlers. And then Why the West Rules for Now, which is kind of talking about basically the power kind of overall in the world. And then we've got Ghost Soldiers here, which is talk about it says World War II's greatest rescue mission. I don't know anything about the Ghost Soldiers. Just kind of grabbed some things to show you some examples. Then we've got biographies, autobiographies, and memoirs. So these are all about real people. Autobiographies are written about and by the author themselves. So if I decided to write a book about all my amazing life, that would be an autobiography. Biographies are when you're writing about somebody else. So maybe I decide to write about the mayor or something. That would be a biography. Usually you start at their birth and go all the way up to current times or their death if they're already dead. They're typically considered a nonfiction narrative. And then we have memoirs. Memoirs are sort of a special category of autobiography where they may be focusing on kind of one period in their life. They're not necessarily trying to go all the way from birth up to now. So here we've got I Regret Almost Everything by Keith McNally, Jan Arden, If I Knew Then, and then Wab Kinew, The Reason You Walk. So those are some examples of autobiographies or memoirs. Travel guides versus travel logs. So travel guides will often focus on specific countries or cities, and they will tell you all about the hotels, restaurants, special events, and places to live, stay. So here's one on London. So if you were planning a big trip to London, I mean, London's a huge city. You don't want to just wander around and hope you run into stuff. You buy a travel guide ahead of time, you plan out a whole bunch of stuff, and you would often take it with you in case you need to make a change of plans. It might have little maps or uh, recommendations for restaurants, all that kind of stuff. Okay, these would not be a narrative format. This would be more like a dictionary almost in a sense. And then we've got travelogues. Travelogues are more like somebody telling you about a trip they've taken in some place. It's usually written from a first person point of view, like I did this and I did that and I did this other thing. They're generally, although not necessarily always, written in a narrative format. Here, this one's called Turn Right at Machu Picchu, Rediscovering the Lost City One Step at a Time. All right, and then textbooks. Textbooks are just an academic text designed to instruct readers on a particular topics for school. They exist in elementary school, post-secondary, secondary, they're all over the place, and they exist in all sorts of subjects: math, history, science, economics, law, art, music, business. They are usually not written in a narrative style. It's pretty rare, but they're more of an informational style. They'll try to present objective information on a topic. They'll be organized usually by chapters and subheadings and all that kind of stuff. Then we've got philosophy, religion, and insight. These are often, although not always, written in a similar style to textbooks. They're going to be discussing worldview, ethics, morality systems, applications. I just kind of grabbed a screenshot of some different examples. Some of these might be the actual religious book somebody uses as kind of their sacred text, like the Quran, and others are more talking about the sacred text or talking about how to live a religious life. Okay, but they'd still be kind of grouped in the same area if you were going to go buy them at the chapter store. Journalism. Journalism is a huge subgenre, and it covers both print and media texts. Some typical print formats are newspapers and magazine articles. Media formats might include things like TV news reports or long documentaries. Journalism is usually going to focus on current events, politics, crime, trends, entertainment, and sports. It can also include opinion editorials and commentary on current events, rather than just straightforward reporting of the facts. Some of these formats may be narrative or others may not be. I wanted to comment on this because journalism has taken a kind of a weird shift in the last 10 years where it's leaning really heavily towards opinions and commentary, which used to be kind of not considered good journalism. So I'm not sure why that shift has been made. But it used to be, there was one page in the paper, and if you wanted to hear opinions, that was the only page in the paper that you were going to find opinions on normally. That isn't always the case these days. But they're usually required to still have the word opinion somewhere on there. So if you're reading something and thinking, wow, this sounds not quite like news, check and make sure that it doesn't have the word opinion or maybe commentary up top. Because if so, it's somebody's opinion about the events. It's not necessarily considered objective. So we've got things like Maclean's, all sorts of different uh, papers, Globe and Mail, Windsor Star, Chronicle, Calgary Herald, National Post, all those kind of things all over the country, right? Sometimes it'll be covering local stuff like, say, Sioux Bulletin, or regional stuff like Winnipeg Free Press, or things like the Globe and Mail will cover a lot of national stuff. Then we've got self-help books. Self-help books are trying to teach the reader how to improve an area of their life. These can relate to a wide variety of topics like finding romance, looking for a job, managing physical or mental illnesses, becoming organized, financial management, decorating, style, and basically any topic you want to think of. They are often intended to be inspirational and transformative. They are not typically written in a narrative format, although they could be, I suppose. So we've got things like The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, The Art of Being Alone, The Body Keeps the Score. They're kind of a way of people doing therapy almost in a sense, but without going to a therapist, they're kind of just reading the book themselves. And then we've got guides and how-to manuals. These are usually focusing on learning very specific skills. They're like a procedural or a how-to writing. Things like how to fix cars, how to build furniture, how to sew, how to garden, how to learn a computer programming language. These are generally focused on very practical details. They are not normally written in a very narrative format, though they could be. So here you've got like an auto repair manual, a sewing manual. Now this one is a decorating manual. It might be written in a narrative format, but I couldn't guarantee it. So they're far more practical though. They're not talking just about ideas. And then reference books. These are different types of books that people consult to find specific information, things that you wouldn't be just sitting down and reading, like a dictionary, a thesaurus, maps, atlases, almanacs, encyclopedias. These are never in a narrative format, right? These are the kind of things you just keep at your desk and you check once in a while. They usually have a special section in the library or at a bookstore. So that's why I'm mentioning them, because you wouldn't necessarily find them in the main part of the library. Okay, and then humor. Humor is a really broad category, and it may have some overlap with some of the other areas. It could be cartoons, comic strips, but it could also be things like essays or commentary on different aspects of modern life. It may or it may not be written in a narrative style. It just depends on the author. The overall purpose, though, is to make the reader laugh or feel amused. So here we've got the ultimate dad joke book, and then we've got Peanuts cartoons, right? And then here's one. This one is by Tina Fey called Bossy Pants. So this one is probably a bunch of essays, and it might be a little bit of a crisscross with memoir, right? It might be talking a little bit about her life, but in a very humorous fashion. Okay, we're talking about the purpose. Writing is a lot of work. So whenever an author is writing, they always have a specific purpose in mind when they write. There is considered to be 3 main purposes for any type of writing: to entertain, to inform, or to persuade. A lot of nonfiction texts will have as their main purpose to teach or inform people about a certain topic. Sometimes nonfiction texts may be trying to persuade somebody to believe specific ideas or to take an action that the writer feels is useful or important. So you might be reading something nonfiction, say about climate change, and they want you to say start recycling or start lowering the temperature in your house or things like that. So it can be a combination of here are some facts, but also here are some actions we want you to take. News reports. One common type of nonfiction narrative is a news report. Now, a news report isn't following exactly the same format as a traditional narrative. Remember, we talked about that: introduction, rising action, climax, and wrap up. So if I was going to draw, I don't think it's going to let me draw that. Oh, maybe it will. Yeah, okay. So if I was drawing that, remember it starts off kind of slow, it gets more exciting, there's a high point, then it begins to kind of trail off, right? That's a traditional narrative format. We're going to be talking about news reports. News reports have this kind of what we call an inverted triangle format that looks more like this. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Um, these ones will have a brief summary in the first paragraph, which is called the lead paragraph, and they're still told in a chronological order somewhat after that point. The focus is still on telling a good story, and it will still have characters and setting and events, right? Here's the proper picture of the pyramid. Up top is all the information that you have to have, additional information that's helpful but not crucial, and then the information at the bottom, which is called the tail. It's nice if they have it, but it's not crucial. And one of the reasons why news reports are written this way is, especially in older times, when the editor was going through the paper before it was being printed, if a brand new big story came up in the middle of nowhere, what they would do is they would go to some of the stories and they would just cut off. They would cut off the ends of the stories to make room for the other story. So writers got used to always making sure the most important stuff was up top in case the bottoms of their stories got cut. All right. So after the lead paragraph, there will be one or more paragraphs that will give more details on the event. That's here in this middle section. This isn't necessarily one paragraph. It can be more than one paragraph. Finally, the report will finish with a section known as the tail. That can be one or more paragraphs that contain less important details to the story that could be cut out of the story without changing your understanding of important details. And I said, this is the inverted pyramid format. If you hear me talking about it, this is what I mean. Oops, hang on. Okay. So now the lead paragraph that we were talking about usually contains brief answers to what we call the 5 W's in the H, but it's usually all condensed into one or two action-packed sentences. It will tell you who, it'll name the subject of the story. Now the who could be a person, but it could be a group, a building, an institution, basically whoever is the focus of the story, even if it's not really a person. What is taking place? What's happening? When is it happening? This could be like a little adverb phrase. Where is this happening? It might be across many places or in one tiny little area or across a region. Why? Is there an explanation for something? There isn't always an explanation. Sometimes we don't know why something happened, but sometimes we do. How? Usually the manner or the steps that are involved in doing something. Okay? So we're going to look at a sample news story. Here we've got city's third bus fatality. This is the headline. There's always like a little title because a lot of people will just look at the titles and they're usually bigger than the rest of the story and people decide, well, do I want to read about that or do I not, right? And then it will tell you the city and usually the date. So here we've got Ottawa, July 27th. Yesterday afternoon, a pedestrian identified as Joe Johns was fatally struck by a bus while crossing Bank Street near Walkley Road. He was running with Bluetooth earbuds, which may have prevented him from hearing the bus when the accident happened. So this is our lead paragraph. It's only 2 sentences, but it already tells us all 5 W's and the H. Who? Joe Johns. What? He got killed by a bus. When? Yesterday afternoon. Where? Bank Street near Walkley Road. How? He was listening to music, so he may not have heard the bus. There's not really a why for this one, right? The next few paragraphs are the middle section of the triangle. Michael Andrews, an off-duty police officer, was first on the scene and found the victim unconscious. Andrews said, "I gave him first aid and emergency teams arrived here quickly. Unfortunately, we were unable to revive Joe Johns. He died on impact." Witnesses were left in shock following the accident. Amy Anstey was driving east on Walkley when she witnessed the accident firsthand. "I will remember that for the rest of my life," she sobbed. "I felt helpless as I watched him run unknowingly into traffic." Johns was a single father of 2 teenage girls and lived in the Alta Vista era. John's friends came forward on a Facebook memorial site today, leaving messages like, "John, you are my friend, may you rest in peace," and many respondents cited John's tremendous compassion. "You were there for my family when I was sick, and I will be here for yours." Bank Street was closed last night for 2 hours while officers investigated the accident scene. The police reported that according to traffic cameras and bystander reports, the bus driver had followed all traffic regulations. Unfortunately, the victim was crossing in the middle of the street rather than at the crosswalk and did not stay aware of his surroundings. The police remind the public that pedestrians should only be crossing at designated crosswalks when the traffic signals indicate that it is safe. So I don't know if you can see it here when I'm doing it this way, but in your unit, you should be able to see that there is a line between each paragraph, okay? And that gives the reader's eye a break. A giant wall of text with no blank spaces is kind of hard to process, especially if the reader is viewing a small screen like a phone. It also helps to break the story into smaller chunks, with each paragraph acting like a little smaller topic within the main story. Okay. So we're going to get started key question 5, but we aren't going to get finished today. There just isn't quite enough time, okay? So this is all about reading and writing news reports. And the first questions 1 to 8, when I mark those, I'm going to be using a rubric called the Answering Question rubric. And altogether, those will be marked as being worth 25 marks. And then questions 9 to 10 are going to be based on a rubric called the News Report Writing Rubric. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because I am not just looking at is it right or is it wrong. I am looking at how well you explain your answer, how much details you use. I am looking at whether you use complete sentences, whether your vocabulary is good. If I just marked each question by itself, it would be hard to kind of get that part across. So when you're doing this, please make sure you're doing your best work, not the least amount that you can do, okay? That makes sense? Okay, question number 1. Before you get started, have you ever watched American Idol? What are some elements that you might expect to see in a story about a music competition? Jot down a few ideas here before you start to read. Now, you need to do this before you go on, okay? So think about any kind of music competition. If you've never seen American Idol, okay, have you ever seen a competition at a school? Have you ever seen a band competition? If you haven't, can you picture what it might look like in your head? What are some ideas that you might have about what you would expect to see at some sort of musical competition? And then, before you read, think about what questions you might have about a story about a musical competition. Write down at least 2 questions on the lines below. So, remember that yesterday we were talking about what makes a good question, because I know this is kind of a hard thing for people sometimes. First of all, is it a reasonable question based on the events and characters? Now, we haven't had any characters. Is it a reasonable question based on what we know? So we know it's going to be about a musical competition. So it would be a strange thing for me to ask, did he win the race? Because it's not about a race, right? Open-ended questions are often more interesting and useful rather than yes or no questions. Also think about if you got the answer, would the answer actually be important to understanding the main idea of the story, or would it not really matter one way or the other? So try to ask a question where if you got the answer, it would actually help you understand the story better. So an unimportant question might be, what are the singers' ages? It probably isn't that important, is that it's not really going to change a whole lot, I don't think. Okay. So here is the story, and then we'll start working on the questions. Let's see, tomorrow's Thursday. We'll finish up tomorrow. The title is Powwow Idol includes Nova Scotia and Ontario finalists. May 4th, 2019. 2 Canadian contenders are among the finalists in Powwow Idol, an online competition to find the best unsigned First Nations drum group in North America. The competition is in its ninth round, and a tribe called Micmac of Millbrook, Nova Scotia, and the Chippewa Travelers of South Central Ontario are still in the running. They are competing against a group from Maine, the sole American-based survivor of 12 drum groups which entered the competition in January. The competition combines the digital with the traditional. All the groups have competed with victory or veteran songs, fancy shawl or fancy feature songs, two-step songs, and a round dance. All the performances are online as audio files, and judging is also over the internet. A tribe called Micmac has been playing together for just over a year and decided to take a chance when it entered Pow Wow Idol. Michael Stevens, 27, the group's drumkeeper, said he doesn't know why they have done so well in the competition. Everybody has their own unique sound and their own unique way of singing, Stevens told CBC News. Each drum is special in its own way, I guess. So we are very fortunate and blessed that we have made it this far. Their Facebook page is flooded with good wishes from supporters in their Nova Scotia community. They are passing on their experience to even younger musicians on the Millbrook First Nation, among them Justin Stewart Muse, 10, who was at a recent practice session. It's awesome. It's smart. It inspires me to think good thoughts, he said, as the group pounded a traditional drum with one hand and squeezed their throats with the other to help them hit the high notes. Chippewa Travelers are a northern-style drum group who started singing together in 1998. The more than 15 members come from Rama, Sarnia, Ardlerville, and other southern Ontario communities. They'll find out late Sunday or early Monday if they move on to the final round of the competition. A winner will be announced in early June. Okay, and that is the end. Okay, so we are going to stop there. We will do the rest tomorrow. If you have any questions, shoot me an email and I'd be happy to answer. Otherwise, I will talk to you guys tomorrow, and you guys have a good evening.